Howdy, Immortalium here. Today I'm reviewing Romeo X Juliet, an anime produced by Gonzo. It's a retelling of the Romeo and Juliet play by William Shakespeare with fantasy elements. First of all, what did I think of this series? It's very enjoyable, I will say that. Of course, it's not without its flaws. In fact, one particular flaw. But I'll get on to that in a sec. First of all, what is the plot? Well, you know, it's actually quite different to the plot of the play. Basically, the story opens up with the actual Capulet family, which is Juliet's family, getting massacred by the what were their names? Montagues, and Juliet is the only survivor. So she's taken away, and she has to hide in, she has to hide for 14 years, while the supporters of her family prepare themselves for the upcoming rebellion. It's set in a fantasy world, Neo Verona, which is basically a floating continent in the sky. There are a lot of fantasy elements included in this, not overwhelmingly so, at least not in the beginning. So you have like dragon steeds, which are these basically they're winged horses. Another word really for unicorns, except they have no horns. And of course you have the Neo Verona itself. There's another fantasy element called Aeschylus, but I'll have to discuss that in a moment. What do I think of the characters? Well, understandably, Juliet gets the majority of the character development. This basically, despite the fact that it's called Romeo X Juliet, and it even has Romeo at the beginning of the title, Juliet gets the lion's share of the screen time and the character development and all that jazz. You know, she gets a sense of I got a sense of connection to her that I failed to get with any other character. Not to say that Romeo didn't get his own fair share of character development, but it kind of paled in comparison to Juliet's. So if I had to pick the main character of the show, that would be Juliet, more so than any other, which is quite interesting. The Romeo himself is a good character as well. As I said, less developed than Juliet, but you know, he works for it, and you know, he's a fine character. There's other great characters as well. There's Tybalt, who he's basically this mysterious, you know, powerful man. We don't know who he is at the beginning. We don't know why he's helping and all that jazz. But he's a really good character, and I really love his kind of development later. There's some other good characters as well, but they don't seem to be developed at all, though, which is a criticism, I'm sorry to say. Great characters, you know, to be there. You know, you have Curio, you have Francisco, you have Antonio, but they never really seem to get much development. I mean, they're helping Juliet, but all we know is that they, you know, their family supported Juliet. Now, we never really get any kind of background to them, per se, except for possibly Antonio, and it's only like a single line that is uttered and, you know, gives a kind of a hint, but it doesn't really say too much. So, you know, that can be an issue. And there's Romeo's father, of course, being the guy who massacred Juliet's family. He is obviously the main villain of this series, and he's not that good a character, I think. As a villain, I guess he's fine. He kind of cliche, I must admit. You know, he's the tyrannical, you know, noble. You know, he has those lines. You know, the commoners are like grapes. We must either, you know, harvest them or crush them. You know, all that kind of stuff. And he's hostile to Romeo. His wife has left him. You know, and I never really, we get some background on him later in the series, but overall he just wasn't that good a character. He serves his purpose as the villain, but you know, I never really connected with him. And now, the other thing I should probably mention is that William Shakespeare himself is a character in this, and he's quite eccentric. He's actually a fine character. Of course, considering he's William Shakespeare, he doesn't need that much development. He basically he's there. He assists. He gives his lines. He's a nice character, usually used for comedic purposes, but also used a bit for dramatic later on. So that's the characters, really. Overall, you know, the characters, while a lot of them are likable, a lot of them are underdeveloped. Not that it really harmed my enjoyment of the show, it just, you know, it could have been executed a little better, those characters. Then it goes on to, let's say, animation. The animation itself was really nice. I really liked this animation. There's a slight dip in the quality of the second half, but you know, it's not that noticeable in my opinion. I mean, it, like, as a trained viewer basically in anime, like, I can actually notice the dip in quality, but it shouldn't harm the majority of people's enjoyment of the series. So overall, the animation is really nice, and Gonzo did a fine job animating it. Of course, it's Gonzo, so you know, they're either really good or really bad. So this is one of their, like, better works, you know, in terms of animation. I mentioned fantasy elements. You know, okay, I mentioned the dragon seeds, the Neoverona thing. No issues there. I did mention Aeschylus. I better just talk about Aeschylus quick, just before I forget it. Aeschylus is this tree, and basically, without giving too much away, it plays a major role in, like, the last few episodes of Romeo X Juliet, and I did not like its inclusion, and I confess the last 2 episodes of Romeo X Juliet, to me, they didn't really work, which of course is a major issue. Like, an ending is kind of crucial to an anime. I've seen my fair share of anime that, you know, don't have good endings. For a while, actually, kind of associated a lot of anime with bad endings before, you know, getting to some of the better classics. So, this anime, like, I did not like its ending. There are probably a lot of people, like, basically people who can tolerate and even like the inclusion of Aeschylus, the tree, will probably like the ending, but, you know, I did not. I thought it devolved into more of a kind of... Actually, it was odd, actually, because I was about to say it devolves into Save the World, but actually, thinking on it now, one of the things that confused me at the end is it seems almost like the characters are fighting against saving the world, which is so odd. I'm not going to spoil too much about it, but it's that did confuse me, in fairness. It kind of threw me off a bit. Like, here are characters fighting basically for love, and that is going to end the world, basically, or something like that. Anyway, the portrayal of the love between Romeo and Juliet is really good. I really like it. You know, basically, you know, she's hostile to him at the beginning because, you know, he's a noble. She doesn't even know that he's the son of Montague yet at the beginning, but as the story progresses, you know, they start to fall for each other. It's not so much, well, it is kind of a love at first sight, although they actually meet each other before the so-called love at first sight. And, you know, at that point, you know, she's hostile to him, but then she meets him later. It's kind of more, the love kind of starts pulling, they start falling in love with each other. But then they kind of, as the series progresses, they start to fall more and more in love with each other, and it's more visible that they fall a lot more in love with each other, which I appreciate. So it's kind of, okay, they do kind of fall in love with each other at first sight, but then as the series progresses, their passion continues to burn ever stronger, rather than to wane, like most, you know, love at first sight stories. So that I really liked. The music, you know, basically that's You know, it serves its purpose. There's a lot of great musical pieces in it. The opening kind of, you know, I'm not familiar with You Raise Me Up, I think it was, by Brendan Graham. Now, my family, having heard, you know, having heard that song a lot, immediately recognized it. Not that they watched it with me, it's just that they heard it from the other room and they were like, oh, that's Raise Me Up, except in Japanese. So, you know, I really liked it. Actually, during the show you hear the English version a few times, which, you know, quite interesting. They could have just used the Japanese version, but they chose to use the English version, and like that is in the Japanese version as well. I actually checked just to see if it wasn't, you know, the English dub people, you know, changing into English for just, you know, cohesion or something, but no, it was in the original Japanese as well. Speaking of the English dub, actually, if you have to watch this series, watch it in the English dub. I have a friend who loves this series but watches it in Japanese all the time. I don't know why, because the English dub here is not only really, really good, but it actually does something, you know, better than the Japanese. Basically, in the Japanese, the dialogue is kind of, you know, it's a standard dialogue, you know, they talk to each other normally. In the English dub, they make it more Shakespeare. You know, they have the lines, you know, like, well, as I said before, you know, pluck the grapes, you know, harvest them or crush them. There's that. What else was there? There's like, they incorporate lines of Shakespeare throughout. They convert certain areas into Shakespeare lines, you know, and they're kind of older English, which, you know, it isn't as confusing as it sounds, actually. You know, when, like, I've heard that when you watch Shakespeare plays, you understand it a lot better than when you read them. And it applies here as well. Basically, there was only one point where I was confused by the line of someone. It wasn't even an important line, you know, it was just Montague talking to his son about his mother, Romeo's mother. And, you know, he just said something and it was a term that I wasn't familiar with. So I just slapped on the subtitle to see what it meant. And that was the only instance. And it was like one line, not important. Throughout the rest, you know, the Shakespeare adds so much to it. So, you know, if you have to watch it, you know, in, you know, either English or Japanese, I would go with the English, you know. Plus, of course, here's another point. This is the first acting role, voice acting role at least, of Maxie Whitehead. Now, if you're not familiar with who that is, two most famous roles, Krona from Soul Eater and Alphonse from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. If you do not know her from those, then you probably don't know her too well, you know, but if you do know her from those, you will know she's an excellent voice actress. She voices Antonio in this series, and she does a very good job. You know, she wouldn't have stood out per se if I hadn't known who she was going in, or even the fact that it was her first role. But she pulls it off very well, and you know, that since I'm a fan of hers, you know, that seeing her first voice acting role was a real pleasure. You know, that was another kind of reason I want to see the English dub. So overall, do I like the series? Yes, I do. Now, it kind of collapses, in my opinion, in the last 2 episodes, to the point where I don't really like the last 2 episodes at all. But up to that point, it's a really enjoyable series, and I do highly recommend it. Not to the level, say, of a lot of other series I have been reviewing. I mean, if I had to give a score, I haven't been giving scores because I kind of think that it takes away some of the opinion, but this, it's more of a kind of 3 out of 4 thing. You know, that isn't a score per se, just a kind of general assessment, you know. 3 out of 4. It's a good series. I do recommend it. Just some elements of it didn't work as well as it could have. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.